The world is a loud place, but sometimes it is in the absolute silence that we find the most terrifying things. Whether it's a late-night shift that goes wrong, a cabin in the woods that isn't as isolated as you thought, or a stranger on a lonely highway who wants more than just a ride. Tonight, we are diving deep into 4 harrowing true stories that will make you think twice before turning off the lights. Sit back, relax, and let the darkness take over. Our first story comes from a man named Elias, who worked as a security guard in Chicago back in 2018. Elias wasn't easily scared. He was a big guy, ex-military, used to the graveyard shift. He was assigned to patrol an old logistics warehouse on 4th Street. It was a massive, cavernous building, mostly empty, waiting to be sold. It was around 2:30 a.m. on a Tuesday. The rain was hammering against the corrugated metal roof, creating a deafening white noise. Elias was in the security booth, watching the CCTV monitors. Most of the cameras were grainy, black and white feeds that barely showed anything but shadows. But camera 4, which covered the loading dock, flickered. Elias leaned in. He thought he saw movement. Not a rat, not a stray cat, but a silhouette. He grabbed his flashlight and radio, stepping out into the cold, damp air of the warehouse floor. The beam of his flashlight cut through the dust particles floating in the air. "Hello? Security!" he shouted. His voice echoed, bouncing off the metal beams, but the only answer was the rain. He walked towards the loading dock. The heavy rolling door was shut, but the side personnel door was slightly ajar. He knew he had locked it. Elias pushed the door open. The wind howled outside. He shined his light onto the wet pavement. Nothing. He turned back to go inside, and that's when he froze. On the concrete floor leading into the warehouse were wet footprints, barefoot footprints. They were fresh. Someone had walked in while he was looking outside. He drew his baton, his heart pounding against his ribs. He followed the wet prints. They led past the rows of empty shelving units, deeper into the darkest part of the facility, towards the old administrative offices. The footprints stopped right in front of the door to the break room. The door was closed. Elias reached for the handle. It was icy cold. He threw the door open and flashed his light. The room was empty, but the microwave was running. Inside the microwave was a single severed doll's head spinning on the glass plate. Elias didn't wait to investigate further. He backed out, radioing the police. When the officers arrived, they searched the entire building. They found a makeshift bed in the ventilation shafts above the offices. Someone had been living there for weeks, watching Elias every single night. They never found the intruder, but Elias quit the next day. He says the worst part wasn't the doll. It was the realization that while he was watching the cameras, someone was right above his head, watching him. This next account was sent in by a woman named Sarah. In the autumn of 2021, Sarah and her boyfriend, Mark, decided to book a remote cabin in the Great Smoky Mountains for a digital detox. No internet, no cell service, just nature. The cabin was beautiful, an A-frame structure with a massive glass wall facing the dense forest. The first 2 nights were idyllic. They hiked, drank wine by the fire, and enjoyed the isolation. On the third night, a heavy fog rolled in. Visibility was reduced to 0. You couldn't see 5 feet past the porch. Mark had gone to take a shower, and Sarah was reading a book in the living room, facing that massive glass wall. Because it was pitch black outside and the lights were on inside, the glass acted like a mirror. She could only see the reflection of the living room. She set her book down to pour another glass of wine when she heard a soft tap, tap, tap on the glass. She froze. She looked at the reflection, thinking maybe a branch had hit the window. But then it happened again. Tap, 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 rhythmically, deliberate. Sarah stood up, walking closer to the glass, shielding her eyes with her hands to try and see through the reflection into the dark outside. As her eyes adjusted, her blood ran cold. Pressed against the glass, just inches from her face, was a pale, gaunt face. It wasn't looking at her, it was smiling, a wide, unnatural smile. She screamed, stumbling back. The face didn't move, it just kept smiling. Mark ran into the room, a towel around his waist. "What is it?" he yelled. Sarah pointed at the window, but the face was gone. Mark grabbed a fire poker and went to the porch, turning on the porch lights. The fog was thick, swirling in the yellow light. There was nobody there. Mark tried to reassure her, saying it was probably a reflection or an animal. But the next morning, as they were packing to leave in a hurry, Sarah went outside to the deck. On the glass, exactly where she had seen the face, were greasy forehead prints and hand prints. But they weren't at eye level for an adult standing on the deck. They were high up. Whoever or whatever had been looking in had been clinging to the wooden beams of the roof, hanging upside down to look at her. They drove to the nearest town and called the host. The host went silent on the phone and simply said, "I told the previous guests to stop feeding the locals." He hung up and deleted his listing an hour later.
Driving alone at night changes your perception of time. This story comes from a long-haul trucker named Dave. He was driving on Route 66 in Arizona, a stretch of road known for being desolate. It was 3 a.m. The desert was an endless void of black on either side of his headlights. Dave saw something in the distance, a figure standing on the shoulder. As he got closer, he saw it was a woman in a white dress, standing perfectly still, not hitchhiking, just staring at the asphalt. Dave, being a veteran of the road, knew better than to stop for random strangers in the middle of nowhere, but something about her posture bothered him. She looked hurt. He slowed down his rig, rolling to a crawl about 50 yards past her. He checked his side mirror. The woman hadn't moved. He cracked his window. "Miss, are you okay?" he shouted back. Suddenly, the woman snapped her head up. Her eyes reflected the red taillights of the truck. She didn't scream. She let out a sound that Dave describes as a mimicry of a coyote howl, but distorted, human. Before Dave could react, she dropped to all fours, not on her knees, but on her hands and feet, like a spider. She began to sprint towards the truck on all fours, moving with a speed that shouldn't be physically possible for a human being. Dave slammed his foot on the gas. The gears ground as the truck lurched forward. He checked the mirror again. She was right at the back tires, keeping pace with the truck, doing 40 miles per hour. He didn't stop accelerating until he hit 70. She finally faded into the darkness behind him. Dave didn't stop until he reached a truck stop in Flagstaff 2 hours later. He told another driver about it over coffee. The other driver went pale. "The spider lady?" he whispered. "You're lucky, Dave. Last guy who stopped for her, they found his truck idling on the shoulder. They never found him.
Our final story takes us to the underground. Paris is famous for its catacombs, the empire of the dead. But beyond the tourist sections, there are hundreds of miles of illegal, unmapped tunnels. In 2019, a group of 3 urban explorers, Leo, Tom, and Chloe, decided to enter a forbidden sector known as the Val de Grace Void. They had been walking for hours, squeezing through narrow passages filled with old bones and stagnant water. They were deep. The air was thin and smelled of copper. They reached a large circular chamber that wasn't on any of their maps. In the center of the chamber was a perfectly clean, modern plastic chair. It was out of place. Everything else was covered in centuries of dust, but this chair was pristine. On the chair sat a video camera pointed at the entrance they had just come through. The recording light was blinking red. It was recording them. "Is someone here?" Leo called out. Silence. Tom walked over to the camera. He looked at the display screen. It wasn't just recording, it was a live stream, and the viewer count was 1. Suddenly, a voice echoed from the tunnel behind them, the way they would need to exit. It was a recorded voice, playing on a loop from a hidden speaker. It said in a monotone French voice, "Subject entered, sealed the exits." A heavy, mechanical grinding noise started echoing through the tunnels. They panicked. They ran back the way they came, scrambling over the bones, tearing their clothes. The sound of stone grinding against stone was getting louder. They reached the narrow crawl space they had used to enter the sector. A large slab of rock was slowly sliding down, closing the hole. Chloe went first, dragging herself through the mud. Tom pushed her. Leo was last. The gap was closing. 12 inches, 10 inches. Leo threw his backpack through and squeezed his body under the stone. It scraped his back, tearing his skin, but he pulled himself through just as the rock slammed shut with a thud that shook the ground. They lay there in the dark, on the safe side, breathing heavily. From the other side of the stone, where they had just been, they heard a voice, not a recording this time, a real whisper right against the rock. "Almost," the voice said, "maybe next time." They never went back to the catacombs, and to this day, they wonder who was watching that live stream.
These stories remind us that the world is full of dark corners and unanswered questions. Whether it's the person hiding in your attic, the creature in the woods, or the trap set deep underground, safety is often just an illusion. If you have a story you'd like to share, or if you've experienced something unexplainable, let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button. It helps the channel more than you know. And subscribe with notifications on so you never miss an upload. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and keep the lights on.